All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Creative Writing. I think is this week 6 now that we're on out of 10. We are cruising towards the finish line. We are cruising towards our creative writing projects, which are our major work for this class. And we are on to our last genre of study, which is personal narrative. And I'm really excited for this week. I truly love personal narrative writing. Um, it is the genre of writing that I have done the most. I have written my own memoir, um, and I've written a lot of personal narrative stories before. I feel most comfortable with this genre as well, probably because I've done it so much. But it's also the genre I enjoy reading the most. I when I go to Barnes and Noble or get on Amazon to buy a book, um, finding personal narratives is my absolute favorite thing. I absolutely love memoirs. I love stories that are true. I love stories that are not just true, though, they're also creative. And so that's why I selected this genre to be in this class. But I still think there's probably some folks out there who are like, why am I writing a personal narrative in creative writing? And we're going to cover that. I am going to address that question because it's really, really important to address. And then I'm also going to only add two conventions because in personal narrative, I really think there's really only two conventions that matter above all else. Um, Obviously, I want you to use other conventions from this course, but there's really just two that stick out to me as if you can do these two, your story will be amazing. So let's get into it. Let's start. Why in the world is personal narrative in a creative writing course? Well, my question would be, does personal narrative count as creative writing? Right? That's the big question. Does the genre personal narrative count as creative? Obviously, it counts as writing. So does it count as creative? And I've included it in this course, so that obviously implies that I believe the answer is yes. And here's why. Personal narrative might not be fiction, right? But fiction and creative writing are not the same thing, okay? Fiction does not equal creativity. I read some pieces of fiction. They're completely made up, but they are not creative at all. And I've read some true stories that I truly believe are some of the most creative pieces of writing I've ever read. So that brings us to the question, what is creative writing? Right? So what do you think? I'm just curious. You can just jot it down if you're listening to this. Just think about it for a moment. What is creative writing? What comes to your mind? Well, for many people, fantasy, murder, that says murder, excuse my typo, murder, mystery, sci-fi comes to mind. For other people, modern fiction, romances, comedies come to mind. In those situations, genre and creativity are being collated. But when I've come to think of creative writing, I'm not thinking of it as a genre equation. I think of creativity as a sentence level thing. I think it's about what we do with the words, not what those words say, or not the subject of those words or the content of those words. I think it's the literal act of putting the words together that is creative. Creative. I said that funny. Creative. I think there is so much creativity to be had just in the form our writing takes and the way our words sound. With, I'm not telling you anything about genre here. It's not about what they say, it's about how they're said. And that's what I think creative writing can be personal narrative, because there are things you can do with your writing that are extremely creative with a story that is not made up. Which is why this week's Writer's Lens has got to be the most important one. Not only is it an amazing story, it's called Shooting an Elephant. It is one of the most creatively written short stories I've ever read, and it's true. Okay, so this week's Writer's Lens, if you haven't done it yet, you've got to do it before you do your trial, right? it really, really matters because George Orwell was the guy that wrote Animal Farm. He wrote 1984. He wrote many essays. He's one of the best writers of the 1900s. He is an absolutely master of language. And we always think of him for 1984 or Animal Farm, which he wrote in like the 40s and 50s. And he did such an amazing job of creating those those fiction pieces. But some of his nonfiction, his personal narratives, are some of his best works, and we never even read them. He somehow uses more creative elements in his nonfiction memoir pieces than even 1984 or Animal Farm. It's just amazing. So let me just show it to you real quick. It's called Shooting an Elephant, okay? And it's a pretty long short story. It's just so beautiful. It's so well written, and it's all true, okay? So it's taking place when George Orwell was stationed with the British military in Lower Burma. There's so much history here that we could discuss. And Orwell is recounting a moment in his life, a very small moment. The specific instance is when an elephant gets loose and rampages through the town that he was stationed in. But it's really not about the elephant. It's really much more about the sentiments of the Burmese people towards him, an imperialistic British officer. But the irony of all of this is, if you've read anything about Orwell, he is more anti-imperialist than anybody. And so here he is being a part of the imperialist regime of the British Empire, and yet he is the most anti-British Empire person out there. And yet he's getting caught in the middle of his role and his beliefs, and it kind of comes to a head when this elephant rampages through town. Beautiful story. So I'll let you read it. I will talk about the beginning of this just a little bit in this video, but you need to read this and you have to analyze it. You have to. It's so good, you guys. So back to our story, though. What in the world? Oh, there we go. So Orwell is using so much creativity in his true story, and that's what we're going to try to do this week. We are going to share true stories from our lives with as much creativity as possible. Let me just give you a quick thing from Orwell's story. I think I probably jumped ahead. Orwell, in Shooting an Elephant, begins his story with these sentences. In Moulmein, in Lower Burma, I was hated by large numbers of people. The only time in my life that I have been important enough for this to happen to me. I was a subdivisional police officer of the town, and in an aimless, petty kind of anti-European feeling, was very bitter. No one had the guts to raise a riot, but if a European woman went, I think I have a typo. If a European woman went through the bazaars alone someday, someone would probably spit Beetlejuice on her dress. As police officer, I was an obvious target and was baited whenever it seemed safe to do so. It's all true. He's not making any of this up. But in 3 sentences, we're already getting to know George Orwell, the narrator, and presumably the author. We can hear his voice. We're getting to know Burma. We're getting to know the setting. We're getting to know the people. They're very anti-European. Right? If a European woman went through the shops, she'd get spit on. He was hated for being there. And this kind of urges us to try to want to know something about what's going on. Why are the British, why are the Europeans over there? Right? So we're pretty much provoked to learn more about the events. He never explains it. He never goes back and says, I was there because the British military took over most of the Pacific Ocean during the late 1800s, and even though we didn't have the manpower to keep doing that, we still sent people over to monitor the trading routes, da-da-da-da-da. He doesn't do that. He just expects you as the reader to do your homework if you want to do so. The story continues, you guys, at just an incredible and perfect pace. He introduces the setting here, he shares his personal sentiments, and then he gets into the story. The story is the pacing is just exceptional. Let's go. That will be one of our conventions, is pacing. So this leads us to this goal. We're going to create a writing course, not a nonfiction course. So we're going to have to marry two things: writing truthfully and writing creatively. You need to be honest and creative at the exact same time. You don't get to make things up in a personal narrative. You just don't. You don't make things up. But I also want to hear your voice, and I also want to know a story. So it's got to be truthful and creative. It leads us to the two conventions that we need to focus on for this genre: pacing and voice. I told you there's only two this week, and they matter so much: pacing and voice. We talked about pacing last week with mystery writing. It is the movement of the story in comparison to the amount of words that take place. In other words, how much time does the character experience at the same time the reader is reading? It's very mathematical. How many minutes or days or weeks go by in a certain section of reading? Fast-paced stories, it's jumping weeks, months, years in just a few minutes of reading. Slow pacing is hardly any time is moving in the story, even after you've read for several minutes. Leads to a question. Answer it for yourself. What pace should a personal narrative move at? Take a moment to think about it. What pace should a personal narrative move at? Whoopsies. I would argue that before you answer that question, you need to start with the scope of your writing. For a trial write, you're going to write 1 to 2 pages. And if you choose this genre for your creative writing project, you're probably going to write 8 to 10 pages. My memoir is much, much longer, but I'll tell you right now, in my memoir, I focus on 1 week of my life. I have 1 week of my life in lots and lots of pages. It ends up being a couple hundred pages. Okay? That, to me, it's because I think I need a couple hundred pages to share this week because it's significant. Could you tell me your whole life story in 8 pages of writing? You probably could, but I doubt you could do it well. Even if you think you have a boring life, your life is probably so full of detail, relationships, conversations you've had, moments that impacted you, that 8 pages of writing truly is not enough. So don't tell me your life story. I don't want to hear your life story. No offense. I'd like to hear it as a person, but as your writing teacher, don't share your whole life story. I think you need to choose one moment in your life, one event, one super meaningful, significant event in your life. And if that event is something that happened over the span of months, you're probably not going to finish this. You probably need to think of a day or two of your life, or 3 days max of your life becomes the event that you share for your personal narrative. I don't think you can do what you need to do in this paper if you're picking months and months and months, or years and years and years. Pick a day or two. Please, please, please. The pacing of your story is so important. I want the most amount of significance in the least amount of time possible, because I want detail. I want detail. In personal narrative, details are huge. And here's the details I care about. I want to know about your relationships with other people in the story. I want to know about your emotions during the story. I want to know about the events that led up to it, but not necessarily the outcome. The outcome can get drawn out. I want to know how certain things transpired to get you into the place that you are writing about. In other words, I want interiority. Just like in modern fiction, your characters are supposed to have this sense of inner thinking and personality and character development. I want your interiority. In other words, I want honesty. And this is really hard. This is really hard. You're in a class. You're not in therapy. You did not sign up to share your life story with some stranger who has zero credentials in therapy or psychology. Okay? So only share as much as you're comfortable with a complete stranger. Share as much as you are comfortable. For some people, they find the personal narrative writing to be almost like healing. Other people find it very, very difficult. There's things, we got some skeletons in the closet, and you don't need to share all that if you don't want to. It is up to you. It is 100% up to you. Okay? The second convention I want to talk about, and this is so much fun, you guys, is voice. I have a really hard time defining voice, but I've come to think of it as the personality of the narrator. Voice is the personality of the narrator that you create through your words. As the writer of a personal narrative, you are going to be three things in your story. You're going to be the narrator, the character, and the writer. Okay? There's three different things happening. You are writing, and as you write, you create a narrator, and your narrator is the focus of your paper, and it is you, and you are the character. So you're going to write in first person. Please write in first person. I don't want third person. First person only. Because you're the narrator, character, and writing, you can use your own voice. You can write how you talk, but it doesn't have to be your own voice. Sometimes you give your narrator a special voice, like a little bit different voice. It could be an offshoot of you. Let me give you some examples though, because voice is a playground. Voice is an absolute playground. You can do so much with it. And seeing examples are really, really helpful, okay? So this is from Nothing Extraordinary. It was a personal narrative. It won the 2021 New York Times Personal Narrative contest. It was written by a high school student. And this is called Nothing Extraordinary. This is the very first section. This is like the first 4 paragraphs. It was Saturday. Whether it was sunny or cloudy, hot or cold, I cannot remember. But I do remember it was a Saturday because the mall was packed with people. I was with my mom. Mom is short, skinny. It's easy to overlook her in a crowd simply because she is nothing extraordinary to see. Wow. You guys, could you get a sense of voice? Look at this. This 5-sentence paragraph. These are paragraphs, you guys. Short paragraphs. That's good. I like short paragraphs. I was with my mom. It was Saturday. I don't remember the weather, but I know it was Saturday because there's people everywhere. I was with my mom. Mom's short, skinny, and completely unimportant. Nothing extraordinary. There's so much attitude. Such a good story. I really love this story, you guys. It's so good. It's about the narrator's mom, as you can probably figure out. And it's about the narrator's struggle with having a mom that she's not proud of. It's an interesting topic for personal narrative. Yeah. But what type of person do you think this narrator is? What type of personality traits come to mind when you read that excerpt, when you listen to me read it? I feel attitude. I feel disappointment. I also feel like this memory is very interesting, that is packed with people. Kind of this crowdedness, this uncomfortable crowding of the character. Yeah, really interesting. We get to know this narrator really quickly through these 3 paragraphs. Let's do another one. Anne Lamott. Everyone's probably familiar with Anne Lamott. Anne Lamott's probably one of the best writers of all time. And she wrote, this is from her memoir called Mother Rage. And she wrote this. I think I just pulled it from the story. But she wrote this, and the voice here is incredible. You can just hear it, right? One reason I think we get so angry, mad at our children is because we can. Who else can you talk to like this? Can you imagine hissing at your partner? You get off the phone now. No, not in 5 minutes. Or saying to a friend, you get over here right this second, and the longer you make me wait, the worse it's going to be for you. Or while talking to a salesman at Sears who happens to pick up the ringing phone, grabbing his arm too hard and shouting, "Don't you dare answer the phone when I'm talking to you." But underneath the fear, I keep finding resiliency, forgiveness, and even grace. You just can hear it. You can hear it, can't you? You can hear a mom. You can hear your own mom. You can hear yourself. I'm a dad of a 9-month-old, and I can relate to this. Just look at my 9. No. You know better. All of a sudden, I'm so connected to the story through this voice. Look at how Anne Lamott capitalizes these letters and has these ellipses and has all these amazing grammatical things going on. Voice, you guys. She creates so much voice in her writing. It's just beautifully written. Man, she used so many mechanics. Capitalization, starting with buts, starting with ors, starting with, look at all the or, but, or. Look at the no, not in 5 minutes. Almost like a response right here. Like the kid said, "You get off your phone now." "Mom, 5 more minutes." "No, not in 5 minutes." You can just get this interplay going on in this voice. It's just so well done. The salesman at Sears grabbing his arm. You just get to know the narrator. So how do you make a voice? How do you make a voice in your writing? Well, first thing I want to encourage you to think about is breaking some rules. Start with and or but. Use exclamation points. Use capital letters. Skip words. Use slang. Don't overuse the slang, but use some slang. Use the ganas. Don't use like. Like never works. The like, and then I like. You don't need to write that. I don't want that. But use slang. Get to know your narrator before you start the writing. Who is you? How do you do that? I think you should just sample write a little bit. Just write something on your own without any sort of audience in mind. Just write and see what you said. Just write and then read it and just see what kind of voice you are using. Is it your voice or is it a writer's voice? Is it a formal academic voice that you learned in school? We don't want that voice. I don't want your formal academic voice. This is creative writing. Writing 101 isn't even a prereq anymore, right? I don't want your formal academic voice. I want the voice of a narrator. It can be your voice or it can be a created voice. I don't care. Draw on examples. That's point number 3. Yeah, you should use your personal voice, but you all will have your favorite examples of voice in writing that you will rely on. You can't help it. I feel like I always end up with a little bit of a Britishness in my writing. I add the word perhaps or quite. I have some dry humor. And that's because I love C.S. Lewis so much. I read C.S. Lewis all the time. And his voice in his writing is extremely British. And because of that, I find myself having like this little British tinge in my writing. So if you read a whole lot of someone, borrow them. Use their voice. There's nothing wrong with that. In a way, you have to come to terms with you having a writer's voice. It could sound just like you talk with your friends at dinner, or it can be something a little bit different. That is fine. Either one is fine. But don't give me formal academic writing. Okay? So, it's your turn. Here's your assignments for the week. You need to do your writer's lens if you haven't done so already. Shooting an Elephant is so good. Amazing pace and amazing voice. It's both. The pace is a few hours over the span of 8-9 pages. It's great pace. And George Orwell's voice is just incredible. It is so humorous, it's snarky, yet also like very, very intelligent. But you don't get the sense that he's trying to poise himself as any way. He's just trying to write the story as it occurred using his British humor along the way. That's kind of how I feel about his voice. Then do your trial write. And this is going to be a little bit harder. I want you to pick a short moment that has big significance in your life. A true story. But only be as vulnerable as you are comfortable being. I don't want to force you to be vulnerable. Only share what you are comfortable sharing. Okay? Pick a very important moment, or a humorous moment, or a clever moment, or a cute moment, or a moment that made you very happy, or a moment that defined you as a person. Any of it. Pick a moment or two. Don't give me weeks, don't give me months, don't give me years. I want a few days, okay? A day is perfect. Because you're going to turn this into 1 to 2 pages of writing for your trial write, and if you pick this for your creative writing project, 8 to 10 pages. You're not going to be able to give me your life story and do it well. So pick a moment, one moment. Please trust me on this. In order to have the detail that you need, one moment is all you can do. Okay, that's the work for the week, and that is an explanation of personal narrative as creative writing. I had a lot of fun filming this video. I can feel my voice getting tired from talking so much, and I hope you guys have a great week. See you.